change. One example that I think of, especially when we're thinking about these issues like landmines, which continue war, is a project that I was not involved with, but I heard about that happened recently. Actually, today's the 12th, right? The 13th, okay, it happened the day before yesterday. It was called If Niger Votes. And I think a lot of people in this room may know that Nigeria is having an upcoming election. If Niger Votes actually was a coalition of blogosphere, young professional organizations, and etc., media personalities that got together, and they said that on January 11th, people should change their Facebook statuses, their Twitter feeds, everything, and conceive of a new Nigeria if Niger votes. And so this got some attention. It was on Yahoo, etc. And it's a way for people who believe in these issues to galvanize together to create it as an event so it can get attention. So it's one of the ways that we can, and it was called If Niger Votes. It was very successful. Even Nas, if people know who the rapper Nas is, tweeted about it. Okay, maybe just the young people in the room. That's all right. But that's a big deal for us. Wrap it up. Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, us youth playing a meaningful role in building communities and interacting with our government is crucial to strengthening our impact on some of these issues. And these are things that IRI actually has started. In Uganda, we conduct mentoring sessions for promising young youth and women across universities to increase their skills in areas such as networking, public speaking, information technology, issue advocacy. In Nigeria, IRI recently held a youth summit, which gathered 77 young leaders from around the country to discuss how we can possibly impact the electoral process. And in Somaliland, IRI held public debates on pending legislation which seeks to lower the age of candidacy for local councils from 35 to 25. I think that all of these mentoring sessions, the youth summits, and public debates are all things that can happen on the issue of landmines in order to create awareness and build a burgeoning young Afropolitan class to discuss and build the tools to confront these issues. The important thing to remember is that structural violence will kill more people than one-time extinction scenarios or wartime violence. And that type of destruction is infinite in its time span. So we, as a young class, need to understand and build new tools and new approaches for how we confront these issues, reorient the debate, and always thank people who bring us food. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank our panelists. That was really engaging and very enriching. So to open the floor to questions for Sean and say, Bethany would have to leave around 2:15. So if you have questions for her first, please try to direct that. All right.
I guess it's one more statistics. There's a lot of statistics we said here, but the most interesting one that I recently read is, and this is to Andrew as well, is it true that 95% of the casualties went through mind risk education?
I don't know if that's true in every country. It's certainly, you may have read that about Cambodia.
For example,
Yeah.
Cambodia.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And if this is the case, so to me, it's not really education. What we need to think about is the main reason why this is happening. People know about the risk, they know the shape of the mine, went through the education, but they still got injured. And in my opinion, it's the economic pressure. They put economic pressure on them to go to that field, take his cattle there, cut some woods for his fire, and so on. So unless we come up with a pragmatic solution to this specific problem, it's not education. People know the risk of the mines in this infected area. And what we need is, how can we increase your 8,000 employee into 80,000? Because believe it or not, that's the pure reality. The more trained individuals to take by hand the mine, the less risk people will get infected with the mine. So how can we come up with specific programs with a timeline to increase your staff from 8,000 into 80,000 in 2 years, 5 years, whatever feasible is? That's number one. Number two, in addition to the human capital, the individuals, people who are trained, is how can we use basic technology that's currently available to flag where are the mines fields. And I'm talking about, we're not talking about big, intensive infrastructure that required megawatts of electricity, but we're talking about simple things like mobile phone. Everybody in Africa, there's a high percentage of mobile phone. So why don't we use mobile phone to download basic GIS maps that tell people in this locality, be careful, there is landmine. Okay, basic things. If we come up with a solution like, oh, we have to improve the socioeconomic life so people don't go to this field, and I don't think that's really a solution. Is increasing your capacity to take by hand the mines and use information technology in order to build the awareness about the locations. That's my 2 nickels.
Thank you for the question. It would be very helpful for me if the speakers can identify your name and where you're from.
Sorry. My name is Ayman Adhir. I have a management and technology company in Virginia. I'm a former managing director of KPMG Consulting, was leading management and technology consulting in developing and emerging markets for the firm. So my interest in this is really come up with pragmatic solution to this problem. I mean, the gentleman from IRI has a lot of magnificent statistics that shows how bad this problem is and how impacting the economics of the developing countries. And if we really do not address it with pragmatic solutions that really things can work, and we keep talking about the big issues, I don't think this is the solution. It's just get into pragmatic solutions that can work and keep measuring.
I think you're absolutely right in principle. I'd like to address both of your points. One is mine risk education not being effective in Cambodia, and the reason for that is economic pressure is exactly right. It's exactly right. There's a family that we know, which is sort of the iconic story of this, where they live on the border with Thailand, where the very huge mine belt, 1,000-kilometer long mine belt exists called the K5, and the man, the head of the household, the male head of the household, would go in every day into the mine-infested forest, and he totally knew it was mine-infested, to cut firewood. One day he stepped on a mine and lost his leg. He kept going. Every day he had to. He had to keep cutting wood. One evening he came home, tired, realized he'd left his axe in the wood, sent his daughter back to get it. She stepped on a mine. And so now they have matching prosthetic legs, and they still cut firewood. They have to. So mine risk education, as a much smaller subset of education, is not the answer. The answer is getting rid of the mines and getting our 8,000 staff up to 80,000. Yes, I mean, that would give us some growing pains, but we can certainly handle 16,000. If more funding were there, we could definitely we could double in size easily. And yes, happy to hear about ideas for that.
Yeah.
To your point about marking the minefields using GIS and all that, I think it's simpler than that. First of all, out in the areas where a lot of these minefields are impacting people, it is not the case that everyone has a mobile phone. In fact, mobile phones are still very rare. And if you have a mobile phone, then you are the phone booth, where it's a great source of income that other people can make calls. But it's not something that everybody has in their pocket walking around. However, the minefields in Cambodia, in Angola, are marked. In Afghanistan, they are marked using internationally recognized. It doesn't matter the village with these internationally recognized symbols, but red sticks or red and white painted stones. Red side is the danger side, white side is the safe side. And the mine risk education is a lot about telling people that's what these things mean, and don't cross them. It doesn't stop people. It doesn't stop children from playing. It doesn't stop children from playing, and it doesn't stop people who need to go into the minefield for economic reason. That's the plain and tragic truth of the matter. Thank you for the question.
Yes.
Given, was going to say something similar to what you said, so I'll skip that. But this notion of education seems to be centered mostly within Africa itself, right? But what I'm getting from you is about education here as well, and reframing the issue, so to speak. I'm a professor, by the way, at the University of Maryland, and also a senior fellow with Phelps Stokes. So when you hit on that, it occurred to me, you said we tend to look at the whole minefield issue through the lenses of national security. I would suggest, and I'm not the only one who suggests this, to look at it more through human security. And how does that take us in terms of education, health, whatever the case may be. That's the first thing. Secondly, what I find with my students, I love my young people, by the way, and I know who Naz is, is that they tend to be highly ahistorical. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily because of them, probably it's the nature of the beast in education these days. But my question to them is, where do these mines come from? Africa, you said, is mostly agrarian culture. They do not produce these things. Where are they produced? And in what context? How did they get there? You know, how many students know about the Cold War issue? Not many. And so in the reframing, we have to look at the whole dynamics of history. Most of my students hate history, by the way. And so I have to usually force them. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
I'm not sure if those are questions or comments, but I guess I can respond to them in good
connection
spirit
with you,
since you're a professor and I used to be a student.
I'm also learning from you.
I believe you're completely right. I think the human security paradigm is something that goes very nicely with my, I guess my advocacy here of positive peace. I think a lot of people, when they think about peace, they should be thinking about it in a human security paradigm, and this will bring lasting solutions, and that is about creating the type of communities that will allow for firm peace outside of just negative terms. So I agree with that, and I think that that is something that we should adopt, and I don't think that's something we do. And that's like the entire thesis of my thought experiment is we think about spatial conception of violence, we think about nuclear war, we think about genocide, and we are so happy that there's a satellite covering Sudan because that's what we're thinking about, outbreaks of war, and we don't think about the longevity of some of these issues, and that the war is still ever present. And I also agree about the dynamic nature of history, and people don't understand. And I actually think that forces another question in terms of where do these weapons come from? And that forces us in the diaspora to ask those questions in terms of our complicity to some of these issues, whether it be taxpayer dollars, whether it be the fact that we're just ignorant. And you can say to my roommate, what is a landmine? Because we don't know these things are going on. Or some more overt racist things that I hear now in terms of, well, if it's not nuclear war and doesn't kill us, and it's just landmines, the world is overpopulated anyway, and you know, why would it hurt if some people around the world were killed because we need more resources? And so some of these things, I think, are coming from a very comfortable ahistorical place and need to be challenged.
I'd also like to add that, again, back to the systems thinking and creating learning communities plays a role in that mutual reciprocity in terms of educating one another about the challenges and looking at the integrated system. You can't take one piece, the mind, what was the term you used, the mind education? Mind risk education. That's a component of the overall learning that should be taking place, and it's not isolated to Africa, as we all know, but to the degree that we're able to have similar conversations in some different spaces and to scale up those opportunities to have those conversations and to learn together in community. I think that's one way, again, of helping to rebuild community and educate one another.
Hi, I'm John Brazel. I'm the High Chair for World Peace at the University of Maryland. And I was wondering, I'd like to understand what, if any, is your experience with the military, because, you know, we talk about education, and what struck me is thinking, one, we talk about education usually very, very materialistic, classroom teachers, but we rarely talk really about education for what, you know, and beginning with education for moral, ethical behavior and an understanding of responsibility, and that education is not just for the kids in the school necessarily, but for the entire society. Now, in that context, when you look at the demining, one of the key things that just strikes you is it's an incredible example of a pervasive lack of responsibility, taking responsibility. These mines are there mainly because the military of the world, formal and informal, put them there. And yet, where is the demand being created for them to clean up behind them? You know, when you want to start training your kids, you say, you throw it on the floor, you pick it up. Now, you've got incredible numbers of military. They're sitting on their rear end. You even have U.S. military who think that the way to be nice and liked is to build, do certain civil projects. In fact, they're the ones who should be held primarily responsible, I would say, to clean it up. And yet I don't see that pressure being put on them. And it's not only a matter of that, it's also a matter of needing to transform even the military mentality from being a mentality. There's a big difference. We talk about peacekeepers, but in fact there's no real model for military peacekeeping. There's just a model for soldiers, with blue hats. So this is both an opportunity, a necessity, it would seem to me, to make clear who should have the primary responsibility. Have you worked with them? I mean, have you tried that? What are the resistances if you have? If not, why haven't you?
It's a great question, and it strikes to sort of a moral challenge that we have when we go out there and, as an international organization, we're primarily local staff. Those 8,000 staff are local, but we are an international organization stepping in and saying we can solve this problem. Does it reduce the incentives for the problem to be solved locally? The fact of the matter is the local militaries are not doing it adequately, if they do it at all. In Angola, there is demining by FA, the Armed Forces of Angola. In Kosovo, there's demining by the Kosovo Security Force. They are not necessarily the ones who laid the mines. In Angola, mines were laid by two sides. MPLA and UNITA, and of course, the Cubans and the South Africans. They were supported by the U.S. and the Soviet Union behind the scenes. But if you think of just those two sides, the side that lost has pretty much disappeared. They've gone back, disarmed, reintegrated, etc. One could imagine a campaign by the Angolan government rounding them up and forcing them to demine, just as Germans were forced to demine Europe at the end of World War II, which was actually a very efficient way to demine the continent. But in the absence of such a harsh measure, then that puts the onus on the government side, who laid half the mines, to go out and do the demining themselves. The standards aren't there. The sort of results focus and the progress isn't being made to the extent that it's really helping people that needs to help. It's always a sensitive topic for us, but we went into Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan, this disputed region, and our model was in 1999 to go and to train 1995, to go and train the local military to solve the problem themselves. A 2-year project, train them, equip them. We helped secure outside funding, set the standards, train them, and then pulled out. 5 years later, we were back because, I won't get into particular stories, but it went horribly awry in many dimensions, technically and morally. The reason why we go in and do it is because we think it's just not going to get done if we don't. And we don't have any particular, we as an NGO don't have any particular leverage with a host government or host military. It is a bigger picture question that you raise that should continue to be addressed and grappled with. It's more of a government-to-government thing, perhaps, or international movement thing. But it's a moral question we wrestle with. We have to, we can either stand back and say the problem needs to be solved by the actors involved, but it won't be, or we can go in and kind of distort the moral landscape, if you will, but save lives and help the country.
Can I just say, but I think there's a third road, okay? The third road is beginning to get what we call the military in the world, to realize that they're, perhaps in a new world, their purpose is not national security, but human security. That's, in fact, their responsibility. And giving them the opportunity to actually do it. As bad as it seems, I've seen examples. I was in the Congo when we had a polio campaign, and for 3 days, actually the fighting stopped, and all the military actually helped get the polio vaccine distributed throughout the country. You know, I've seen soldiers who actually were trained under unique instructions to help citizens and actually respond and see the citizens in Africa stand around astonished to see soldiers actually helping them. You know, so, and if you look at the United States, in fact, I think many real changes come when the new generation begins really questioning the older generation. So that these kids in the school, not you as a foreigner, but these children in school begin to go home and go to their local and start saying, why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you helping? So I just think that there could be a complementarity, and it should be looked at carefully, because the issue is the landmines, but behind it is a larger issue of how we convert, I do think, how we convert what we now have as a military model for national security into an idea of a peacekeeping model and human security.
It's the model that was used in Central America with the OAS.
Yeah.
And, military clearing mines from, not as large scale as Angola. And I think we're seeing in certain countries, after 10, 15, 20 years after the conflicts ended and the governments are starting to feel secure,